Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Tony Maglione, and this is a podcast on Political Pulse. I am doing 6 of these podcasts here, ending the year, and so far I've done 2. We talked about the state of the nation, the state of American medicine. We've talked about climate change and COVID, some of the truths and untruths, and as I mentioned on other forms of media, I did get canceled by YouTube because of apparent misinformation when talking about COVID. And, I stand by everything that I said, but unfortunately, there are people now in the world that suppress free speech. Even if it's not the truth, they're suppressing it. But, I stand by it. God knows what the truth is. I know what the truth is. And one day, everybody will be judged for how they behaved in difficult times. And this is one of the difficult times. And I wanted to do a few podcasts just more for informative, try to open up people's minds. I've been involved in doing this for about 14 years now. I've written several books. And it's just something that I feel the need to do because I want to leave a record of how I predicted certain things 14, 15 years ago about the state of medicine and what could happen in this country if certain leaders got their way. And, we're seeing that up and close right now in today's world. So today I'm going to talk about good versus evil, because I think if we can't understand the difference, we can't know what's right or what's wrong or what needs to be changed or what we should fight for. And I do believe our purpose on this earth is to know the difference, is to know how to think so that we can get at truth. And when you get at truth, you can start telling the difference between good and evil. And then the second part of the show, of today's show, will be about what happens if it doesn't change. What can we do about it? How can we take care of ourselves? How can we do something productive? And I'm going to get a little into detail about that, not just from a medical point of view, but also from a political science and practicality point of view of what we can do. Because right now, a lot of people are suffering, not just in this nation, but in the world. America is a world leader, and when we go down and suffer, the rest of the world will also go down and suffer. And we don't want more of God's children to be either killed or made more unhealthier or controlled or imprisoned or killed. These are all bad things. Again, it all comes back to a belief of whether you have in God. And with that, you can then really understand why we're here, what good and evil is. And then I'm going to do in November and December, I'm going to get into more about the election for 2024, why we should be endorsing something that's already worked. And I'm going to get into that and why on every level it's the right thing to do and what we can do about that. And I'm also going to talk about truth, and I'm going to get into what we can do when everything gets to the point of it becoming more tyrannical or a police state. Like I said, today I'm going to talk a little bit about what we can do, but it's on a different level than what I'll talk about the remainder of the episodes later this year. And so let's get to good and evil. Let's get started. So, where does that concept come from? How do we know good and evil? Well, we knew it as Americans because that's how our nation was founded. Our nation was founded based on virtue. Virtue basically means that we know what's good. We know the template of how to behave without even having to have laws. Because God gave us what we call natural law. We already know it. Biblically, there are the commandments, and there are all the other sins that include greed and lust and control and power and all the and envy and all the things that we know are sinful. As a nation, we began as a virtuous one. Why? Because every founding father, even though they'll tell you otherwise, believed in the Bible, believed as God was the creator, and understood our rights came from God. Nobody can take away, no government can take away those rights. They can oppress you, they can kill you, they can imprison you, but they can't take away those rights. Those rights are inherent by our own birth. For those of us that don't get aborted, we will have those rights intrinsically. And so when you have those rights, you already know there's a moral compass. Our country was founded on that moral compass. Were they perfect in how they started? No, for various reasons that won't get into in this discussion. There were things that could have been done a little bit better from the beginning. They could have known that politicians, that man was corrupt. They understood that innately they can become evil. They will do things to enrich themselves and their family at the expense of others. That's basically what evil does, where you have disregard for others other than yourself, your family, or your friends, and everybody else you can use for your own benefit. When that happens, it's obvious there's an extent of evil. And right now, we have more evil in our country than we've ever had at any other time in history. We are defying God's laws, natural laws, more and more with the open borders and the human trafficking and the way we're doing our foreign policy and becoming more dependent on a country like China. And the reason we have to talk about China is they are the epitome of evil. Communism is the epitome of evil. Socialism is the epitome of evil. They're trying so hard to indoctrinate our kids to be part of a non or a godless society and to be part of one that actually creates hatred, mistrust, and chaos and confusion, so that then a few people at the top can control everybody else. It's easier to control when people are fearful and are always told what I consider to be the real true misinformation. Anytime you go away from God and God's word, which is the truth, you actually are giving misinformation. You are not understanding the total picture. You are not connecting the dots. So we need to do those things for the main reason is if we love God, we will love everybody. We can forgive the bad people, but we don't forget. But we also try to do our job and our purpose that if we understand it, we become warriors. We're warriors against this spiritual fight for the soul of our nation. We have a major, major problem. The Biden administration now, in cahoots with, the Clintons and Obamas and degrees of power of other people as Soros and Gates and others, where money is the most important thing, control and power the most important thing. The truth doesn't matter at all. They've given China more strength by decreasing our energy independence. We decreased it, and they want to do electric cars now, which will decrease our use of fossil fuels and decrease our energy independence even more, so that we become more dependent on countries like China and to a smaller degree Russia. And when you do that, you allow them to have more control over us, which their history is very simple. It's not about helping people. It's about dividing people. It's about hurting people. It's about controlling people. It's about having power over them. And when people realize that and start uprising, if they don't have weapons, they get crushed, they get oppressed, they get imprisoned, they get killed. The evil that's occurring with open borders we just mentioned, human trafficking, child trafficking, I've gone into the examples before on previous podcasts, that there's about 2 million kids that are enslaved by human trafficking a year. 2 million. I mean, it's just amazing. And many of them are forced into doing sexual acts or actually sacrificed, and people pay for this stuff. The United States is 4 to 5% of the population of the world, but yet account for 50% of the revenue of human trafficking in the world, including adults and children. So obviously there's evil going on, because if you think it's good to abuse children, young people, force slavery, force prostitution, and then maiming people, if you think that's good, then obviously you don't need to listen to what I have to say, because you don't understand the obvious. It is morally reprehensible. Look, almost 100 years ago, C.S. Lewis wrote and told us about the moral objectivity. We understood it, what he meant, because it was self-evident. It's self-evident that we were a moral nation. We were born in this world created by God, and to understand the sense of morality. Biblically, it's outlined for us. It's not unclear. It is completely self-evident. He goes on and explains the obvious. That subjectivity is poison. It's against truth. And because then you can subvert the truth, you can brainwash people, you can force people to believe a lie. Look, there are lots of people who believe all these lies about, when I mentioned in the previous podcast about COVID and about climate change. You can believe something is your perception, and that becomes your truth. The fact that you believe something and you perceive it to be true doesn't make it true. Truth actually makes it true. And we know the truths. We know a lot of scientific truths. Now, beware, some scientific truths are not absolute. They get altered a little bit with time and information and more scientific methodology that comes with technology. So we don't always have absolute truth. But biblically, we have absolute truth. We know morally what is right and what is wrong. And if we don't grasp that concept, we will never get the truth. We will never get to be a great nation again. It is of vital importance that we go to a place, and that is, to me, I would love everybody to get more involved in understanding how to think, in reading more and more of the Bible. You will begin to connect the dots, get studied books, programs that make you understand the Bible better, because, it took me a while. I was a Catholic, to start reading the Bible and take the scripture more seriously, because we weren't really taught that throughout my younger years. So it really wasn't until about 30 years ago that I started getting into that more and more, and understanding more about life. I understood the politics. I understood corruption a long time ago. I saw it early on in healthcare. It still exists today. Right now, there's so much more corruption since Obama became president, because of certain changes and regulations that allow hospitals now that own most of the doctors to double and triple charge you, and you have very few avenues to fight back. It's happened, to my own wife. We protest, and then they say, "Oh, you're protesting. We're going to write you up as being some type of verbal abuser because you're pointing out the mistake they made." Instead of correcting it, they double down, just like the administration. They're the ones. It is the Democrats that were colluded with Russia and the dossier. Everything they accuse the Republicans or conservatives, especially in this country, or Trump, they're the ones that are guilty of it. And that's just pure evil. Because when you're lying, or like Biden lying and stealing, or other politicians that do that, or these attorney generals or judges that don't interpret the law the way it was intended, they end up also lying. And what they do is they steal away your liberty bit by bit. And one day, if they get enough of a police state, they'll completely control us. So we need to know that what's being done is evil, that having an open border is evil, that having closer ties, or a president that has been paid off through his son and brother has ties with not just China, but Russia and Ukraine and other countries. So we help China by being in Ukraine, because China makes some money giving ammunition to Russia. They help also because the United States has to spend all this money to try to fight Russia. Then China stays on the sidelines and just makes money for production. We're helping them by our energy policy. We're helping them with open borders because they don't care. They're as corrupt and evil as any country in the world. But they don't have a conscience. They don't believe in a moral compass. They don't believe in a moral objective truth in the biblical sense that is self-evident that our rights came from God. This was the only country, the United States, that believed that. And they followed it. In fact, Alexei de Tocqueville, a French man who came to check out our legal system and our prison system for France, he commented how virtuous we were as a nation. Back then, we didn't have these types of violence and murders, and everybody owned a gun, by the way. It was like, if you were of age, it was practically 100%. And so having guns was never the problem. Again, another myth, another lie. I've done podcasts on that, but that's what they want. In the end, if you want to control people, you misinform them through the media, you misinform them from the government, you misinform them through the education system, you try to take away their ability to defend themselves, and if once you get to that point, you can start taking away their money and their property, and you are completely enslaved. And so that's the sad thing, is that all these people that don't understand history and don't understand what's going on have been duped, have been brainwashed to believe a lie that hurts because they don't see that this is evil. This is not just, a difference of opinion politically, because there used to be a difference politically. Because there were times, and the Republicans are at fault too, because they don't want term limits, because men are not infallible and women are not infallible. Nobody should be in office in the Congress for more than 12 years in their lifetime, because the majority of them will either intentionally or unintentionally will want to keep it for a sense of power and control, or because their egos get so big they think they're the only ones who can do that job. The sad thing is they've done the job poorly on both sides. We finally had a couple of good presidents, Reagan, that made a big difference economically and ended the Cold War, and you had Trump, who gave us the greatest economy and helped minorities more than any Democrat has ever done. But the fact is, it doesn't matter. If there's lying and deception on the other side and people believe it, that is their truth. And the reason is we become godless. We cannot know that there is a moral equivalent of objective morality that is self-evident as truth. God gave us those rights. They're being taken away. They do it by teaching kids to be godless, teaching them that the parents are the enemy, teaching them that people that are different than them are the enemy. These are all the very things we've gone away from, because let's face it, the education system is racist, is sexist, is genderist, where they and it's unscientific, where they pretend there's more than two sexes, and they want to teach kids to have sex at a young age because they're sick. I mean, this is the sickness that God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah because of their impropriety and their treatment of children, not just as sexual objects, but also as human sacrifice. We're back to that now. The thing is, like I said, back then it was proportionate to the certain areas in the Middle East. Now, a small percentage of the population, less than 5%, accounts for 50% of the revenue of this evil act, which is condoned by the media, condoned by over 90% of Democrats, and it's the open borders, abortion, let's not even get into abortion, another way of killing children. We are all feeling the oats of that. The things that happened in slavery in our country early on created a punishment, a civil war, where almost 20% of the men in this country were killed or maimed. And that was, basically a little bit of karma. Things come back to you. The same thing here. We got COVID. Who got killed? The old people. The old people that were killed are the ones, many of them were the ones that supported Roe versus Wade in the 70s, the passing through the Supreme Court, and they supported abortion. There are things that happen for a reason that come back. They come back biblically, they come back historically. Not too few people talk about it. I mean, there's Jonathan Cahn and a few others that are very verbal about this, and we're having enough preachers and prophets that are true, that are out there, but just not enough. Unfortunately, we have too many people in power. So the next segment, I'm going to get into, what we can do about it, how we can take care of ourselves. But the purpose of this segment was to understand there's an inherent difference. People who sin, people who lie to you, people who steal from you. When the government tells you they need money for climate change, they're lying to you. They know climate change is not going to happen. Those same people are having $10-20 million homes on the water. If they really believe climate change and the things they're saying, they wouldn't be buying property there and living there. So it's a hoax. But the fact is, people believe it because the fear of the word that is completely false becomes greater than people wanting to know the truth. We're not teaching kids how to think. We're only teaching them what to think. And they're falling for it. Smart kids. I mean, I know personally, my own family and many members, my own kids, they've been fooled. It's just sad. They're not people who have been uneducated. They have been people who've just been brainwashed and naive and unfortunately taught to be hostile in many cases towards people who think like us, who believe in true science, the truth, believe in dialogue and getting at answers, not stopping people from communicating, taking away our First Amendment rights. We believe in all this stuff, but they hate us because we have a different view than their agenda. They don't understand their agenda is going to destroy this country, and 99% of those very people who supported the Democrats with this agenda are also going to be persecuted, imprisoned, or killed. They just don't know it yet, and because of their ignorance. So let's try to learn as much about the Bible, and we can get more truth. We can understand good versus evil, and we need to stand up with the truth when we see evil. We need to expose it, talk about it, as many of us are trying to do around us or through podcasts. And like I said, I'm going to stop this part of the episode here. We'll take a little break, and then we'll be back for the second part and see what we can do about it. Thank you. This is Dr. Tony Maglione, Political Pulse. Stay tuned. Hi everyone, this is Dr. Tony Maglione. You are listening to Political Pulse. We're at the end of September, and this is a podcast for the October show. This is part 2. We talked about good versus evil in the previous section, and we're going to talk about what can we do since there is more evil approaching us, more of a godless society. What is it that we can do? And I'm going to go over several aspects. But first, I want to just finish one point about the evil that we see in our society. I talked about it, how it's objective, morality. We were a virtuous nation. We need to get back to that, not a godless nation, full of sin. And in the Bible, I just forgot, I wanted to quote a couple of verses from a proverb and one from Exodus. To fear the Lord is to hate evil. So if you don't fear the Lord, you're going to love evil. You're okay with opening the borders. You're okay with child and human trafficking. You're okay with more violent crime committed on the innocent. You're okay with innocent people going to jail and guilty people not being brought to justice. And other one in Proverbs 4:14, don't do as the wicked do. Don't follow the path of evildoers. Don't even think about it. Don't go that way. Turn away and keep moving. For people can't sleep until they've done their evil deed for the day. They can't rest until they've caused someone to stumble. It's like what I said, when you're doing something that helps you or your family or your friends at the expense of other people, chances are you're doing evil. You're definitely sinning. You're making other people the priority. We are here by the grace of God and should be doing God's work. We should be here in an effort to get our stuff together so that we're mentally, spiritually, and physically prepared to not just help ourselves, but to help others and to bring other people to Christ. And so that is the goal. And from a health point of view, it's what we're going to talk about now, about what we can do. Because if we don't develop a different attitude, we're going to let this stuff eat us up inside, and it's going to cause us mental and physical anguish. And there aren't that many things that need to be done. The most important thing that needs to be done is to have faith that no matter what, God has a plan for all of us. If we have that type of faith that we know that God is in control and that things will happen to those of us that believe, in the end, we will be hopeful that everything will turn out the way it's supposed to. And there is a reason, like I said, we have this environment of which evil has dominated this country worse than at any other period. There is no question about it. We've had more troubles with wars, the civil wars and world wars and other turmoil, but depression, we had terrible times. But in terms of being godless and going away, that has been the most significant thing that we have that's hurting us. And so I want to just get that out there. So what is that we can do? Number one, we have to have faith. We have to have hope. We have to begin to start trying to live a virtuous life where we shouldn't have to have laws to guide us to do the right thing, to do the moral thing, to do the objective morality as we talked about earlier with C.S. Lewis. The bottom line is if we have these things, we will have a better life. We will be happy. We'll be content, even though it won't be easy. We have to show gratitude every day. That helps us, not just in terms of not getting down, not getting depressed, not getting more anxious. That belief system, that faith is what's going to get us through the hard times, because there's no question, even if certain things happen in our favor and for a short while things may look up economically in terms of our own personal safety and our foreign affairs and keeping peace in the world, it'll be transient. There will be evildoers that will come, because eventually there will be a judgment day. We know through Revelation what's going to happen. We know through the words of some of the old prophets in the Old Testament what's going to happen. So it's not a mystery. Now, if you don't believe that, then you live on this earth and you sin and you get what you want for yourself. But, my hope, since you're one of God's children, is that at some point you'll turn it around and ask forgiveness and also redemption and be grateful. Be grateful for everything God's given us. There are a lot of people, as a doctor, I've seen some of the most horrible things that happen to people who didn't deserve anything. But I know they're going to have a place in heaven, and that some of the people that's probably suffered more here on earth may even have a better place in heaven. We'll find out, but my gut feeling is the suffering you do here on earth is not going to go unnoticed. And if you do it knowing that God's got your back, you're going to be in much better shape on Judgment Day. And so that's the main thing and what we can do in these situations. Now, we got to also take care of ourselves. We have to have some preparation in terms of what might happen. And, obviously not everybody can get all the equipment and storage of food supply or be able to do their own garden. But as much as you can store food and save to have 6 to 12 months supply, we may be able to, get through when something happens. There could be a nuclear bomb. It could be something that upsets the electromagnetic field, and we won't have electricity. We won't have iPhones. We'll be out of commission for a while. And so having some of that preparation and learning what to do in that situation is good. Having gas stored up so that you can get away, having some things that you can adapt easily to make your own food. Having weapons, because there's going to be a system of safety. We can always just give in and hope for the best. But I think preparation is the best. It's just like preparing for Judgment Day. God wants us to be prepared. The longer we can be on earth and help change people's hearts and change people's souls, the better off we will be in terms of our purpose, and the happier God and Jesus will be. There's no question in my mind that the more we do to help others understand what we understand, what eternal life will be like, and that Jesus sacrificed so that we can be forgiven for our sins and that we may have eternal life. So the more we can do that, the better it'll be. So having gratitude, dealing with certain situations in terms of preparation as best you can. Try to take care of yourself. We have a healthcare system right now that depends on people being sick, because the hospitals now own over 80% of the doctors. They pay their salary. It's just like the pharmaceuticals contribute to the NIH and Fauci. That's why they were letting drugs go through that probably weren't screened very well. Even the FDA are in on it. It's about money. It's about crime, criminal activity for certain people to benefit and certain companies to benefit, and certain people in government to benefit. And we know that that is happening. So we're going to prepare ourselves, knowing that people are going to constantly do things to harm us. Like there's going to be more viruses that come out that are be man-made, and their goal is to decrease the population, to hurt us, to hurt our immune system. Look, this isn't misinformation. We know what's already happened, and that truth is going to be out there. So the way to prepare ourselves is physically, mentally, and spiritually. I briefly touched upon the spiritual part, having the gratitude, believing in God, having the faith and hope and trust that God's got our back, and that we have the Holy Spirit with us, and that we can get through anything, even though it's going to be hard. And I'm not going to say that for a certain percentage of people it is very, very hard. But the better shape we are, the better our physical and mental capacities are. Gratitude is important. Prayer is important. Getting healthy, keeping your weight down, eating healthy, exercising. Exercising is one of the best things you can do for your immune system. The movement, I keep telling patients, some people, they're stuck in a chair, but I said, you can move your leg. You can bicycle on a little stationary small bike pedal that you can get that's not, you don't have to sit on a bike. You actually get just the foot pedals and you do your bike just for your feet and get exercise. You can do things for your arms in terms of weight training or stretching, or just using a band and having resistance. All of these things are possible. Obviously, the more you can do stuff like that for 3 or 4 hours a week, the better off you're going to be. Spiritually, I think as everybody gets older, they should be spending more and more time learning the Bible, talking to God, praying, not just for themselves and their family, but for others and their country and the world and all of God's children. All of that will make you appreciate things. Ask God, if you don't know how to connect the dots and understand things more in depth, ask God for help. Ask God to teach you more how to think so you can analyze information and come to the truth. Because the truth is out there. God's given us all the ability and the equipment to be able to get at the truth. The problem is, like I said, people get fooled. In Exodus, they said, thou shalt not follow a multitude, a crowd, to do evil. Because like Voltaire said, if you can believe absurdities that they tell you, the lies basically, and that your perception of the lie becomes what you consider to be the truth, then they're capable of making you do atrocities. And look what they've done. They caused Antifa, Black Lives Matter to riot and be hateful and destroy property and hurt people. Over 20 people were killed in the summer of 2020 when there were supposed to be told there's a lockdown except for when you're protesting and hurting and destroying people. So, I mean, we have so much craziness out there on almost every front. So we have to mentally stay grounded. Stay grounded in the thought that that God has got our back and that we should be grateful every day. We don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know when that judgment day is going to happen. We don't know when the destruction is going to begin. But if we go with the attitude of love and trust, we're going to be in better shape day to day in all our relationships, whether it's work, whether it's your family, whether it's your spouse, whether it's dealing with friends. If having that attitude, you're going to be happy, in a better state of mind. It's going to be easier for you to have joy. It's going to be easier for you to laugh and and get the right type of chemicals inside your body that are healing, that are good for your immune system. So all of that is important. But you can't just do the physical, you got to do a mental. And I tell people, you pick what you want. Learn subjects that you're unfamiliar with and kind of study stuff, unless you want to do puzzles or math puzzles. There are so many different things that we can do now that are on the internet, all types of games, even card games and stuff that make you think, that make you use your mind. Doesn't matter what age, you should be doing that also 3 or 4 hours a week. So the bottom line is, you got to spend 10 to 12 hours a week at least in prayer, in reading the Bible, physically and mentally helping yourself. If you can't spend a couple of hours, almost a couple hours a day doing that, as you get older, you're wasting the precious time to get more in line with your real purpose on this earth. Many people think, oh, if I'm famous, or if I leave money and am rich, that's what's going to make a difference. None of us are going to be judged by how much money we have when we die. If you think that that's important, then you've misread the Bible. In fact, the poor are actually going to be judged much more favorably than the rich. And if you did come into money and you were fortunate, or you worked hard and earned it, you'll be judged by what you did with it. It's not the amount, it's what you did, it's your attitude, how you treated people. Because I've been around in medicine, I see a lot of people, they think they're God. And in healthcare, whether they're on the doctor side or whether the administrative side, and they're making a good income, and they really hurt people, rip them off, lie to them, and they're just like, the old-time politicians, mainly on the left today, that do everything mainly for themselves, for their own benefit, at your expense. So understanding that and combating that with the type of exercise that you can do. And obviously, sometimes as you get older, simply just walking is good enough. Playing sports, be careful about getting injured. Obviously, you have to balance that and learn what's good for age appropriateness. So I can't spend the time to go in detail generally to the public about this, but in general, that's what we need to do. Individually, I can give specific advice based on their health, their age, how well they did on the stress test. So, but in general, if we don't do all three of them, the spiritual attitude with prayer and gratitude, if we don't do the mental attitude to improve that and keep that sharp every day, and the physical, it's all intertwined. What keeps us whole, it much less depression, much less anxiety, much less fear. They can't get to you as easily and mislead you. If you're unhealthy, it's easier for them to do that. And that's why they want to give you medicines that are unhealthy, vaccines and other things, because you're easier to control. When you become more dependent on the system, the healthcare system, monetarily, the way it's set up now, is going to be destroyed, because we're basically setting up a universal type system at Cadillac prices. It's just like our debt and everything else. If we keep being this irresponsible, there's going to come a time, whether it's 5, 10, 20, 40 years from now, where it all breaks down. So there's a lot of irresponsibility. And that's the last point I want to make here in these last 7 or 8 minutes, is that learn about what's going on in the world. Learn about what's going on around you in your own country. And understand that the people who succeed are the ones who are freer. Jesus gave us a choice to have a relationship with God, and we will be rewarded if we have that relationship and believe and give our life to Jesus. We know what our outcome is going to be, and therefore, the more that you learn politically, you will then be able to pick candidates that are about your freedom. And unfortunately, now the Democrats, the left, don't care about your freedom. They want to control you. Opening the border is just chaos, destruction, division, hate, and besides the violence and all the other evil things that are the cause of that. And like I said, there's very few people on the right who supports that. And the ones on the left support open borders, human trafficking, abortion. And obviously, that's not godly. They can say they believe in God, but it's a false God, because they're falsely believing that the Democratic Party is leading them in the right way. And I think even with all the failures they have done in the last 3 years, there's still somewhere between 30 to 40% who still have faith in them. And it's amazing to me that they could be that dense, that naive, that brainwashed, or possibly that evil. And so it is concerning. But that having that knowledge, knowing who you can turn to, knowing what you need to do for yourself and to keep things together. Love the people that you're close with, the people that share your beliefs. Let them know you love them. And tell the ones that cause disruption, who hate you, basically because you believe in God and you understand how this country was a great country. And if it goes back to its old values and stops being godless and stops doing these evil deeds, we will then become a greater country in the future. That is the hope and prayer for many of us. And we will not give up, because there is always hope. God has his hand on everything, and we could pray for that outcome. So learn about the politics. And we need people just like Trump, who isn't perfect, but he gave us the freedom, just like Jesus gave us the freedom to choose. You have a choice of believing and having faith or not. You have a choice to act a certain way, to not try to sin as you get older, to ask for redemption, to confess. You have a chance to do all of that. Well, in freedom, in our country, those that want less government, smaller government, wants you to keep more of your hard-earned money, they're more about freedom. Those that want to protect, like you would protect your own house, or the politicians on the left protect their own house, you don't let people in that you don't know. There's a process of coming in to whether it's a house or into a country. And the fact that they are doing something that's irrational means their motives are not good. They're not there to help you. And if you haven't figured it out yet, many of them do know what they're doing, and they know it is evil, but don't care because they're godless. They'll tell you they believe in God. They'll tell you they're doing this for your own good. They'll tell you all of that. It is just pure lies. So when you get there, just understand, we can't vote for people on the left anymore. You just can't, unless you want to end the world sooner. Because if we keep going down this pathway, we know what happened. God sees that not only is the sexual promiscuity gone crazy with the transgender, gay and lesbian and all the other stuff that's happening, but also the evil and maiming and killing of children that is unprecedented now at any other time in history, with over 2 million slave children in the world each year being stolen and obtained, just from the streets. And these are national facts. I'm not making this up. People can look this up. There's a couple of resources that you can check to verify those numbers. So when that happens, we then have to pick the right people. The right people, even if they're imperfect, and you don't like their personality, you don't like their style, but if they are keeping the peace, as Trump did, we didn't get into any wars, try to lower any casualties to keep the peace, because you get peace through strength. You need to strengthen the military. You need to bring God back in the picture by making Jerusalem the capital, the true capital, because it is the capital. Biblically, we know That's what's going to be the main place of revelation at the end of time. So by doing that, he's morally correct. He has done a great job economically, increasing jobs for minorities and women in this country, and keeping inflation down. Everything the left is doing is the total opposite. When Trump closed the border, this is what we need. And I think we need him now because he's got experience for 4 more years, and that's going to be one of my other episodes in the very near future. So, just to sum it up, we're here to do what we can. Each of us has a responsibility. Some of us, all we can do is, try to stay afloat and pray. But many of us can do more. We can get more involved, informing other people, learning as much about the current situation, not just biblically, but socially, so that we can help our fellow man. The more we can do that, we will fulfill our purpose. Because our purpose here is not just to survive and get an income and just make it till we die. Our purpose is to enrich ourselves to the point where God is pleased. And when we are judged, we have nothing to be ashamed of, even though, of course, we all sinned, but we know we've got eternal salvation because of our redemption and because of Jesus' death on the cross. So I will stop here. And like I said, the next episode, we're going to get more into the political realm as to how to vote and why it's so important, not just on a federal, but on state and local levels. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. We'll get into truth before the end of these 6 podcasts that I'm doing. And thank you for listening. I'm Dr. Tony Maglione. This is Political Pulse. This was the second part of the 3rd podcast. And everybody have a great day.